the podcast that floats down here.
Well, hello there, and welcome back. You have stumbled upon the podcast that floats down here. I will be your host for this particular episode. I'm Alyssa. I am joined by Luke.
Hello.
And Ben.
Good evening.
And we are here discussing Stephen King's It, Part 3, Grown-Ups, Chapter 11, Walking Tours, Section 3, Bev Rogan Pays a Call. Again, because this whole chapter was 74 pages, we decided to break it up into the sections, and so Section 3 was 12 pages long, which is 1.1% of the book. Hey Ben, can you tell us what just happened?
Your hair is winter fire, January embers. My heart burns there too. Beverly walks and reminisces about the poem she had kept hidden in her bottom drawer, the one that if her father had found, he would have beat her bloody for having. Because I worry about you, Bevy. Beverly had hoped the poem had been from her first true love, Bill. She had loved him because he was the right kind of authority.
She had loved him because he was the right kind of authority she needed. She knew, however, but still couldn't remember when he admitted it, that Ben, dear, sweet, fat Ben had written it, and that he had truly loved her. Beverly continues to have island-like memories flash in and out, until she thinks of the grackle birds that come back every winter. That is when she realizes she is standing in front of her childhood home. After hesitating, she approaches the door and finds the mailbox marked with Marsh. Not wanting to, she rings the bell. When no one answers, she was happy and wanted to walk away. Instead, she rang again, and a third time. Someone finally came to the door, an old woman, Mrs. Kirsch. Mrs. Kirsch tells Bev that she had rented the apartment after her father had moved out, and was sorry to inform her that her father had died 5 years ago. Mrs. Kirsch invited Bev in, and lets her have a look around the house while she boils a tea kettle. Bev wanders around checking out her parents' old room with a beautiful cedar chest engraved with an R.G. Her bedroom, which was a sewing room, and finally, the bathroom. She watched the sink and waited, but nothing came out of the drain. This time. Mrs. Kirsch calls when tea was ready, and Beverly joins her in the parlor. Bev comments on the chest before getting a bit uneasy around the elderly woman. Beverly notices Mrs. Kirsch's teeth turned yellow, became crooked, and some just a bit too long. Beverly's unease grows as Mrs. Kirsch explains the chest was very old. It had belonged to her father, Robert Gray, better known as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. Mrs. Kirsch continues to change and morph, losing her beauty and turning into a witch right before Bev's eyes. She tells of how she was birthed from father, right from his asshole, 'cause he loved his jokes. Bev takes one last sip of the tea to find out another joke. It is literally shit in a cup. The witch gives a warning to run if Bev is wise, and the house turns into candy. And it was the same witch from Hansel and Gretel. It changed again into her father. I worry about you, Bevy. I beat you because I want to fuck you. And finally, the clown made his appearance as Beverly escaped the house and fell in the street. The clown advanced on her until she screamed out, "The Grackles know your real name!" And the clown was gone. Beverly looked back at the house and found it to be in shambles and uninhabitable. As she turned to leave, her leg was grazed by a balloon which had something written on it. That's why it's Wabbit.
All right, so let's just jump right in. Any overall thoughts about the Beverly section?
We just hit 50% of the way through the book. In this
Ooh.
Thank you, Kindle and Audible, for letting me know that. But I don't know, it just feels like there is so much that hasn't happened. I feel like everything that's we've seen has been backstory. Like, there has been so few, like, current storylines. Because the timeline jumps around so often, it feels like we haven't gone anywhere yet. And that is ominous, I think.
I think that's a recurring theme for this book. Overall thought is I really dig this chapter. It does fall under the creepier scenes and pretty, intense is the best way I can put it. Just a nice slow build to a high crescendo, but it all happens within 12 pages.
See, I really dislike this chapter for that exact same reason. I don't like creepy. I don't like scary. And all I keep thinking is, how dumb is she to go into a stranger's house? If you just would have a little more common sense, then that wouldn't happen. And I realize they're supposed to be following their intuition and blah, 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 blah. Mike gives them directions. Fine. But,
I'm going to disagree with you that she's not an idiot for going into the house. It was her house. Yes, she doesn't know the woman, but she's also an elderly 80-year-old plus woman. And I get it for not really leaving because, once you get stuck in there talking with an old person who never has anybody coming around, a decent person isn't just going to be like, okay, gotta go. I mean, you learn, at least in my profession, the side shuffle towards the door as you're like, okay, yep, as you keep walking. But
and I'm saying, as a single woman walking anywhere by yourself, you don't go into any house, even if it's one you used to live in.
Sure.
So, yeah, no, dumb. That was a bad move on her part.
I don't feel like she chose to at all.
I agree with you,
like
but
her decision to do so. She was actively deciding not to, right? I mean, this is the same thing that we've seen so many times. These characters, once they get in the proximity of Pennywise, and I have questions on as to if he was always there. I think we'll get into that, but there's always the on rails thing that happens to these characters when clearly the bad things are coming. I mean, it's so obvious that, the line that really stands out to me was, "But I won't ring. I don't want to see him. I won't ring the bell." This was a firm decision at last. The decision that opened the gate to a full and useful lifetime of firm decisions. She walked down the path, back to downtown, up to Derry Townhouse, packed, cabbed, flew, told Tom to bug out, lived successfully, died happily, rang the bell. She's going through the entire thought process of, I'm going to just continue on this, taking control of my whole life back again that she's got whenever she had the fight with Tom in the at their house when she left, and she's been building on that, and she has no chance of continuing that here.
Yeah, it slightly reminds me of the South Park joke. Well, we'll put your money into this bank account and it'll build interest, and it's gone. It's like, I'm going to walk down the path. I'm going to do my own life. I'm just going to go. And she rings the bell.
And
all right. And I'm not going to do it again. No one answered. Cool. And ring the bell.
I feel like this whole chapter is like that. Or this whole section, of that chapter. And that is all I have to say in the comment. Other thoughts?
Going back to the beginning of the chapter when she's on her way walking, she thinks back to the last time she heard from her dad. He sent her a postcard, saying, "I hope you're well. I worry about you. And, if you have any money, please send it." And this is before she actually even was a famous designer or had anything, so how bad off is he in his old age that he's asking his broke daughter for money?
I don't know. Part of me wants to say that if you're desperate, yeah, that's what you do. You talk to family and you ask family, but obviously this is family that wasn't in contact with you. So why would your first thing be to ask them for money unless you're trying to manipulate them into feeling bad for you? To me, it is less about him needing something and more about him trying to control her emotions, but I might be reading too far into it.
That's kind of what I got out of it as well. Does it mention what happened to her mom? I don't remember.
I don't believe
I guess
so.
I'm assuming that she died first, kind of thing, or maybe she's still around and left him. I don't know. I don't think it mentioned, but it clearly seems like here her dad is living, by himself and is probably doing fine. From everything we get from Mrs. Kirsch, which again I have questions on all that, but Mrs. Kirsch clearly had information like, oh, well, Al Marsh. I keep thinking Stan Marsh, which is not accurate. A different father figure. So Al Marsh, she basically said that she saw Alvin, right, is what she called him, and that he was kind of doing okay. He had moved, and she saw him in the marketplace. So,
But he moved to somewhere more rundown, more
okay,
desperate, like not as well off
it
as
was
even
the
this
even
place
worse
had
area.
been.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe he was having a tough time, but it definitely felt more manipulation based, trying to, even from a distance, keep some kind of wrangle on her, at least sympathy wise.
I just want to make a comment about the postcard. So the postcard was of the really fantastic Paul Bunyan statue. So super love that. But her comment that even though it had been a landmark of her childhood, but her father's card had called up no nostalgia or memories for her. It might as well have been a card showing the Gateway Arch in St. Louis or the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. So super shout out to St. Louis there. Yeah, Arch.
We can
That's
revel
all.
in our hometown.
Woohoo! That's what we get. Which is funny because the arch was built in the 60s. So,
After
You know-
the early part of the story.
right. But, I mean, so you can date the postcard at least from that point that it
Yeah.
was,
It was at least 10
After-
years after, because that was built in 1967, so...
yes.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that it was at least 10 years. Well, I mean, they were children then, so she might have... Yeah, I
She
don't
was
know,
in her
we haven't-
20s by that point,
Yeah,
or right at 20. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
who knows what happened to her?
Right, I was going to say, that's one we haven't heard a whole lot about the early part of, like, after she left Derry. Like, we just have, like, her as older, young professional type Bev, I think.
Yeah, we miss her 20s.
So I'll go with my next point, or next line that I kind of liked, was the memories being like coral popping up through the ocean, all separate but not. So it's kind of, she's getting these spurts of reveries, of these memories, of these, remembrances that just pop up here and there, and she knows they're all connected. She just can't see how they're all connected.
They're still just on the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
They can't see the stuff floating underneath.
It's funny, like, they all know that, right? And they're
Mhm.
actively like, if I could just remember. And then, like, there have been several times in this chapter, just through these first 4 sections, they're like, each one of these characters says to themselves, if I could only remember. And then, like, all of a sudden they start remembering it, like, because they're doing these walks and, like, just, like, really getting in that environment of jogging those memories that they're trying to. So I don't know if it's, like, where the causation is here or not.
Like,
but
are they remembering because they're in the environment? Are they remembering because they're choosing to finally remember? Are they?
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, so it seems ambiguous, and I like it because it shouldn't be that clear.
Well, speaking of remembering, I really like that Beverly finally remembered that it was Ben who had sent the card.
Right? Yeah.
Thank goodness. It's about time.
She still doesn't remember how she knows, but now she...
No.
Well, she
But-
says, "I'm pretty sure he." She was like, "I'm pretty sure he told me," and that was a big deal because I told Bill at the same time, kind of deal, and she was like, yeah, she's still not remembering everything, but
Yeah.
she remembers.
But
it
there
being
was
a
definitely,
big
like,
deal.
A giant moment thing where all of it kind of came out.
And both of those pieces of information were very valuable. So something that Benji touched on in his summary, the line, because of all the boys, Bill was the one who projected the sense of authority she associated with her father, but it was a different sort of authority. Somehow, it was authority that listened. It almost seems like this would have been a really healthy relationship for them if they could have made it work. Like, yeah, she's predisposed to kind of fall for that because she's been literally trained to work that way. I'm not saying that's a good thing at all, but it seems like with Bill and him being so genuinely decent, it could have kind of, I don't know, worked out for them. I don't know. What do you guys think on that? It's a very problematic thought process, I know.
Your thought process brings me back to another book series that I have read. Not one that I'm proud of having read, but that I have read called 50 Shades of Grey.
I knew that's where you're going.
Yeah. And it really comes down to Beverly's a submissive. She needs a dominant. And if you're that personality who needs a dominant, then you better find one who's going to treat you like a Bill would,
Right.
instead of like how a Tom would.
Mhm.
Yeah.
She picked the wrong type of dominant because she's always going to be a submissive.
Mhm. Which is why it won't work with Ben, because he's not a dominant from what we've
Poor
seen.
Ben.
I mean,
See, I see that.
Poor
but
Ben.
I don't see it working with Bill either. Bill's not a dominant either. He's just a leader. If that
I
makes
vote
sense.
Richie.
Richie could pull it
I
off.
can see it, honestly. And they've had a lot
God,
of chemistry,
he's so,
too.
yeah. Okay. All right. Except, see, I don't know. I bet Richie brings out like her fun peopling front that she puts on, but like to go home and do that, I don't know. She would need
The
to
depth
like,
isn't there for...
she'd have to be on all the time with him unless he wasn't on all the time.
Yeah.
And they got
So-
medication now for that.
Something
All right.
that Benji had touched on there that we really haven't seen Bill as really a dominant person. I really don't think we've seen him as much of an authority leader much. They all just reference that he is. There has been like one time where he said something and it like carried some weight, but I just feel like we haven't seen enough of all those characters together yet, at least for me personally. So I only hear about this being a thing. I don't feel like I've been shown
it. And I think a lot of it's not so much the things he's done. I think it's the way he carries himself. And that's really hard to translate into a book. And I don't think it's his choice. I think it's how he's viewed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've seen that. We've seen
I do
how
think
Eddie
we've seen
views
that.
him. We've
Yeah.
seen how Richie views him.
Worshipping.
Yeah. And even,
he's just like, I'm just hanging out. Like, I'm not trying to do this.
but there's some kids who are just like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just some kids that just because of their charisma or their charm or their sense of just, they already know who they are. So they don't need to, like, they just have a lot more power in a room than they realize.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting as an adult looking at a group of kids. You can see who those power players are, even if they have no idea. So the trick is to get those kids on your side. But yeah, like I don't think it's tangible yet. And I agree with you. We haven't seen it manifest itself in a group dynamic, but I think it's coming out because the other kids read it into it. Nothing he's done.
Agreed.
Moving on, I'll go to, still before we get to the door, Bev thinks about how her dad how she got her drawing ability from her father. And she made a comment, I forget what the line was, but basically, my note to it is sperm doesn't teach you how to draw. You know, you don't genetically get that ability, but a good teacher like her father can. Notice I didn't say a good father like her teacher, or as a teacher, but a good teacher like her father who would show her how to do it and repetitive. That's how you get good. So
Yeah, the line was she credited him for providing the sperm that gave her the red hair and her left-handedness.
yeah,
And then she talks about how he taught her how to draw and they had a fun time doing it. He showed her how to do it. He could draw anything if he wanted to. He didn't want to very often.
All right. So Mrs. Kirsch, what do you think about her in her house before she goes all into the upside down with it?
yeah. I mean, it's kind of a typical, 80s style old person house, the way the description comes, maybe looks like it got set up in the last 5 to 10 years, so it was somewhat modern-ish for the time, but you could tell just the stylistic of it was done right to where it was believable. And my first note with it, is there anything you want to add to that? Or?
I mean, definitely the first time going through it, I mean, other than her being drawn in to ring the bell 3 times, I didn't really feel like we had a real clear indication that this was going to be something bad. And it was a very believable story that, yeah, I mean, she probably did move there, 5 years ago, and it just seemed to make sense. And I didn't get too many things from the old lady, as opposed to, I mean, other than just being lonely and wanting someone to talk to, and having kind of a secondhand connection to this delightful young woman that just knocked on her door, trying to reminisce in her own childhood a little bit. Like, I feel like she's just being a nice person that realizes I can get something from her, and she can get something from the house that I have, and I can just be decent to her. And boy, howdy, that changed.
My note, going into that in their conversation, even though she lost touch, it still has to be a shock to learn your father's dead and didn't care about him or whatever negative side you had. It's still a tough thing. Something that you were semi-close to.
All right. So then Beverly gets to wander through the house a little bit. Anything stand out to you there, Luke?
Absolutely. The initials on the cedar chest. Right away, I was like, you never just put initials. Like, things aren't hidden very well. Like, it's supposed to be pretty blatant that, hey, this is likely a thing. It was right there where it was like, all right, now my radar's going off. You know, more so than her hesitating to go in or even ring the bell. It was here where I was like, okay, RG, what could that mean? It's not Pennywise, you know, Bob Gray, Robert Gray. Oh God. Okay, here we go. Like, I actually went through that thought process, but I paused it. I was like, okay, initials, let's figure out who this is. And then that was the final confirmation that shit's about to go real far down for her.
Yeah.
Excellent catch.
Yeah, my note is, I wonder what's in the chest, you know.
I don't. Go ahead. Ponder away. I'm going to sit here and pretend I'm not listening because I don't want to know.
I have no idea. Maybe the suit.
So I like that when she gets back to Mrs. Kirsch, that her first real physical flaw that comes out is her teeth.
Mhm.
Like, that's the first thing that starts to change.
Mm-hmm.
Is that her teeth? Oh, that's just like teeth of, you know, everybody in this area. They're well put, but they're yellowed. Oh, and her eyes. Oh, and her this.
Oh,
And it's like,
what
yeah.
big
Oh,
teeth
the-
you have.
the better to eat you with, my dear. The better to see you with, my dear. And I was like, oh, great. We've just turned into Red Riding Hood.
Right.
Yeah,
Which
I-
is
I-
perfect for Bev, right? I mean,
Yeah.
red hair. I mean,
Yeah.
it absolutely fits.
Yeah, and I like the thought process of, you know, if I don't acknowledge it, she won't know that she's changing. So I'm just going to keep going on and being polite.
Yeah. Part of the reason I don't like it because it's well done and fabulous and brilliant and scary. And I don't do scary, even though I love this book. But see, this chapter, it just gets me. All right. Just this section. Just this section.
Yeah.
The Eddie one, I was good with. This one, not so much.
I definitely got a lot from the line that you just referenced, Benji, about if I don't acknowledge it, then she won't realize. And we've seen that in a lot of different areas, that as soon as you actually process it in your brain and decide, yeah, this is messed up, that's when it knows it's got its claws in you and really starts going for the kill. If you continue to ignore it, I mean, even Ben, when he was crossing that bridge on the frozen lake with I guess it was the mummy, right? Way
Mhm.
back when, he kind of tried to stay away, obviously, and we've seen that be a very smart choice in general for facing it and running. It also kind of tried to ignore it. It just seems like the more power you give it, the more powerful it is. And I think what you said was really puts a good word, for it, is if you don't acknowledge it, it won't have the power on me. She leaned over the sink, catching a glimpse of her pallid face and dark eyes in the mirror over the basin, and then she stared into that eye, waiting for the voices, the laughter, the groans, the blood. How long might she have stood there, bent over the sink, waiting for the sights and sounds 27 years gone? She didn't know. It was Mrs. Kirsch's voice that bid her to return. Tea, miss. So this is a little bit before where we were just talking, where the teeth start showing up, but it's just like another one of those, it seems like this could be not the smartest choice to go into the house, and she does it. It seems like she probably shouldn't go into her parents' bedroom, and she does it. But, nothing bad happens. She does it, and, okay, not a big deal. She gets anxious about it, and then it turns into nothing. She goes to the place where we saw blood come out, just a ridiculous scene. Terrifying.
And keep in mind, 2 hours before this, they had just finished the lunch
Right.
where all the scary things were climbing out of their fortune cookies. So it's not like nothing's happened yet
Right.
today.
But
Yeah.
so she's actively trying to test out the drain, and nothing happens. So this is another checkbox of, okay, we're at a safe place. Nothing's gonna happen here. It's gonna be when she leaves. She's gonna leave. This wasn't the place to go. This is a red herring, if you will. And it's just not. It is literally just waiting for her to get comfortable. And then I think kind of uses that. So let's move into a little bit more of the transformations that happen here, right? So clearly starts turning into a big bad wolf type figure. Oh my, what big teeth you have, what big eyes you have. And then turns into Hansel and Gretel witch, right?
The crone. Yeah.
And that's when the tea turns into shit, and she had already taken a sip of it, and that's pretty messed up.
See? No fun. Go on.
And basically, this is like clearly, okay, this is Pennywise, right? You can't fake this anymore. And like it's not just a perception by Bev thing. Things are transforming around her very, very clearly. And Pennywise, well, Mrs. Kirsch stating that Pennywise or Robert Gray is her fodder. It's so weird. Like I have a lot of questions about this transformation, more so than I think I have previously.
Yeah, he's my father. My father loved his jokes. Oh yes, he loved his jokes.
And it was my father that birthed me. He shat me from his asshole, and then there's shit in the cup. And I think the thing that she says that also really connects everything together is she calls it a little party favor from the sewers under the city. So it's, again, full connection back to this industrial, whatever, that connection into the machinery of the town, full-fledged, not personified, but brought to fruition here.
Yeah, and then the next form on it is her dad, and that one was messed up. That one's still... Yeah, I have a bit of it highlighted. I'm not going to get into all of it, but... I beat you because I wanted to fuck you. Bevy, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to fuck you. I wanted to eat you. Just Jesus Christ, how sick and twisted is King.
Yeah, that was the exact portion that I also highlighted, and I stopped there.
Yeah.
Because it's fucking gross. It's bad. Read it.
No, I skipped it. I was like, I see words I don't use, and I don't allow to be used around me. So, I was like, yep, okay, bad stuff. Moving on. And I've read it before. I was like, nope, we're just going to skip right over that.
Yeah, pretty messed up.
Spoiler alert, that won't be on my favorite thing in this chapter list.
So, like, throughout the dialogue that Pennywise is getting out here, he states that no one who dies in Derry really dies, but you knew that. And I just love how King phrases things at times, and it's something that we know, but me as the first time reader, I'm still parsing through a lot of this information and trying to figure out what the hell's really going on. And it's just another interesting way of stating information that we kind of knew in a new way, if that makes sense, because we've heard the voices and we know that these children and people are all dead, but are they actually? I'm curious to find out more and more every chapter that we go, which is a good sign of good literature.
Yeah, and one more line that I have quoted here, Pennywise to Bev after he's still the father, but now he's in the clown suit. Looks like he came from outer space. Tell your friends I'm the last of a dying race, the only survivor of a dying planet. I have come to rob all the women, rape all the men, and learn to do the peppermint twist. That pretty interesting wording. In that. I can leave it at that, but it's pretty interesting wording that he chose to go with.
And he's holding a child's leg like you would hold a turkey leg from an amusement park while he says that. So, just throw that part in there.
Yeah, sorry, did miss that.
But she, like we've seen other characters before who've had success against this boggart, she took the power back. She uses a line which I found very, very interesting. This was the second reference to grackles in this chapter. And for those who don't know, grackles are birds, basically. And she said that the grackles know your real name, she screamed at it suddenly. It recoiled, and it seemed to her that for a moment, the grin on the lips inside the great red grin that had been painted on and around them became a grimace of hate and pain. This is the second time we have specifically seen birds being used, weaponized against the monster. and I find that very interesting.
2 thoughts to the Grackles thing as well. First, I get a Rumpelstiltskin feel for it, because if you I see that look, Melissa, but if you tell me my name, you don't have to do this, that whole story. And
Yeah,
so
I like that.
the Grackles know your real name. That made him recoil, and then secondly with the birds. But the line itself, too, made me look it up just to see if it was from an old fairy tale or something like Grackles mentioned. And when I Googled the line, I was brought up to realize I had totally forgotten about the show Castle Rock that came out on Hulu. And so I spent this whole last weekend binge watching it as much up to current time. I highly recommend it. Melissa, if you haven't seen it, you would really dig it. So anyway.
So let's move on to my favorite section called Questions for the New Reader.
That's why
Or-
I have it.
For everyone. Question 1. What is your scariest fairy tale? Because, man, it would come out in this section.
See, I read this question, and the other reason why the Grackles thing made me think of Rumpelstiltskin, because I had to go back and think of a scary tale, and Rumpelstiltskin.
This is a tough one, because a lot of the fairy tales you grow up learning nowadays are not the true fairy tales, the originally written ones. So it gets a little complicated, because I've gone into some of those other ones where, I mean, even like Cinderella is way darker. Like, all of them are way darker. And so, like, really any of them are pretty terrifying, truly. Like, they are messed up. Anything from the Brothers Grimm, or, I mean, anything like that, it's way, way darker than you'd realize. And highly, highly recommend 2 podcasts that go very, very deep into all of that stuff. Lore is amazing, and also the Myths and Legends podcast. Highly recommend both of them. Very, very interesting stuff. And some of the stuff that I have learned from, I think it was Myths and Legends, has talked about this character quite a bit, was Baba Yaga. It's a Russian old witch of the woods, which is not the same as the Hansel Gretel, but there's a lot of big similarities. And that's who I thought it was supposed to be when we were first going through this. And man, I loved what this chapter did. But to actually answer your question, Rumpelstiltskin's kind of hard to beat, because he's supposed to be grotesque and a frightening individual by himself. But so I think I'm going to probably say that, just because I can't think of enough specifics about another one of the true stories to really stand up.
Well, if I go with the Disney version, it's Pinocchio, because that movie always scared the crap out of me in all the parts. None of the parts are not scary. So even Disney-fied,
I'm still
Pinocchio
terrified
scares
of Ursula.
crap out of me.
Little
Of
Mermaid
Ursula.
Well, and so that goes with my second answer. My second answer of not necessarily scariest, but definitely like the one that makes me upset the most is the original Hans Christian Andersen version of The Little Mermaid. Oh, horrible. And like so depressing.
Yes.
Not necessarily like scary in a, oh, the big baddie's going to get you, but just like depressing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
That's good.
Question 2 comes from Ben.
Is Al actually dead?
Oh, man. Okay, so I think to answer this, I kind of need to break open one of my really, really big thoughts on this chapter. And it goes
Hold on,
into-
let me get comfortable.
It goes into kind of what my question is back to you. So I'm going to kind of combine that together. My question back to you from the new reader is, did she even go in the house? She questions that herself. She looks at it, and it's run down, broken out windows, like, seems to be kind of abandoned. And let's say she did go into the house, and now she's looking back and things are different. How much time did she actually spend there? I don't know. Like, there's so many things that make me question, did any of that happen? You know, like, was this all her standing on the sidewalk?
Of course this is happening inside your head.
Does
But
that
why
make
on earth
sense?
should that mean that it's not real?
Nothing
Kind of.
in this story is. I mean, everything is questionable that we've seen. I mean, and that's kind of what this one really opens up to me. Is I haven't gotten that feeling too many times where, like, oh, like Eddie Corcoran really wasn't being chased by the sea monster. Like, I was like, that's probably happening. You know, like, clearly no one else could see it, but he's actually running. You know, regardless if the monster can be seen, it's a true threat, and he's really running. But here it seems like until she ran across the street, she wasn't moving kind of thing, which means it maybe happened in an instant, or maybe she was just standing there like gaping with her mouth open in hypnosis for 10 hours.
Because didn't she wake up in the middle, like wake up quote unquote in the middle of the street, like a truck?
She was
had to
on
dodge?
the sidewalk, and it was while she was running from the clown in his spaceman suit that she ran across the street and almost got hit by a delivery truck, and she got yelled at by that guy. So my final thought on questioning if any of this really happened, let's say it does happen. She really does go in. There really is a Mrs. Kirsch, which even before Bev in this chapter, second guesses again that it really said Marsh. I'm pretty sure it really said Marsh. Because she convinced herself earlier that, what does she say? She says, in my agitation, subconscious, it switched Marsh, Kirsch to Marsh. Let's make the assumption that it did say Kirsch. There really was a Mrs. Kirsch. I very much, spoilers for Harry Potter coming up, book 7, reminded me of Nagini and Bathilda Bagshot. Very much. That when Beverly went to her parents' room and into the bathroom, that's when Mrs. Kirsch got taken out by Pennywise and replaced by Pennywise, kind of thing. Like, it happened while she was there.
Gotcha. But
that was the thought that went through my head, at least.
I gotcha. And I get that. My one counter to that is when she left the house, she looked back and saw it was in ruins.
Right, and that's why, at that point, then I was like, well, shit, now I have to question absolutely everything.
Yeah.
That was before she actually got away. These are the thoughts going up. I was like, okay, this feels very much like a doppelganger type deal, evil doppelganger that got transposed in the middle while Bev was there. So a lot of thoughts on this chapter.
And now, one thing I did want to go back to really quick was the teeth thing, because it made me think that I should have gone back when I first read through this time. When she first met Mrs. Marsh, she mentioned her smile, and because she's like, were her teeth bad? It doesn't mention her teeth, but it does mention a smile, and a lot of people first thing you notice is somebody's teeth. Like when you meet somebody, especially with a smile, I've noticed that coming from a guy who had bad teeth. People notice your teeth or a bad smile way before anything else.
So to actually answer your question of is Al dead? Sorry for me rambling onto my thoughts, but I feel like I had to almost process my answer for your question. I think he is. I think the story that Pennywise via Mrs. Kirsch gave to Bev was true on that. So I'm going to say yes.
I have a theory on Al. I think Pennywise would not have been able to turn into Al if Al wasn't dead. You got to use the dead bodies. He keeps them like clothes hanging in a closet.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that before.
Right.
I don't think we've seen him inhabit or mimic any living person.
I don't think so. I don't remember, but that's kind of my impression that, he is the owner of all the dead things.
Yeah.
Once they die, they never really die because he gains ownership over them and can use them however he likes, with voices, with visages. I think we've definitely touched on that, and I am more and more starting to completely agree with you.
Any other first reader thoughts?
Really, really interesting section of this chapter. One of my favorites so far, just for what it's able to do in such a short period of time.
It's a very impactful scene.
All right, now we're going to move on to my favorite thing. Benji, let's start with you. What was your favorite thing?
Since I mentioned it probably 3 or 4 times, the pace. Just that slow drum beat building and building and building and building and building, and then just thunderous until stop. She's out the door, across the street, turns around, done. Kind of got that with Eddie a little bit last chapter or last section, but it wasn't as intense. It wasn't as freaky, I guess.
There was a lot more downtime before anything happened there. He's just walking down the street for 20 minutes.
Yeah, true. I think his might have been a longer chapter, and a lot of nothing, kind of just reminisce. This was a lot of actual stuff happening, especially with Mrs. Kirsch and all that. So that's why I'm sticking with the pace of this one.
Luke, how about you?
I am a really big fan of the usage of fairy tale terrors here. It's the first time we've had anything like that. A lot of the other monsters that we've seen have been kind of classic 20th century horror flicks, like standard monster type stuff. I really like that it's gone into more of a classical fairy tale region here, and it just makes me think of how many more doors that opens up for Stephen King to really start delving into. How about you?
All right. I don't have one. And not because, I liked all the parts, or, it was so, like, this, here you go. My favorite thing is how absolutely just skin crawling it is. I had the hardest time reading through this chapter. I had the section. I had the hardest time taking any notes. I'm having the hardest time actually conversing about it, because that might be one of my biggest fears, is being trapped in a place with somebody who can overpower me. And I think that's one of my biggest things. And so I go out of my way to always, be aware of that. And here I am watching her just be like walking in, like you said, she has no control over it. And it goes against like my toes are curling. I'm so just irked and grossed out by this chapter. So, nothing. I have no favorite. And that wraps us up. We are around and available. We would love if you could follow us on Twitter at Floats Down Here. You can send us emails if you have any questions, or if you would like to agree with me about how right I am about how creepy this chapter was and how that is just hard to live through, at floatsdownhere@gmail.com. We strongly encourage you to go check out our website, which is thepodcastthat.com. Today, I would like to direct you, when you go to our website, to click Support Me and go to our TeePublic merch. You can get t-shirts with your Floats Down Here logo, along with logos from any of our other shows. So check that out. The shirts are amazing. And my favorite thing about that is that it's not like, you get a shirt. You can put our logo on tank tops and sweatshirts and t-shirts and cell phone cases and pillows, which is really random.
Travel mugs.
Right? So...
Sorry, even with, the t-shirts, there are different, qualities of t-shirt materials that you can get, too. And you can customize all of the colors that you want. And it's really, really cool, the customizability that they offer for us.
So you can support us, and you can sport your Floats Down Here merch in whatever is your own personal style, including even baseball-style tees, which our fearless leader, Luke, here is sporting this evening. We absolutely would love if you could find us on iTunes, subscribe there, rate us on iTunes. That goes a really long way. If you want to leave us a comment or a review, we would love to hear from you.
And just so you know, we're, as Luke mentioned, 50% way through this book, so we are putting a shout out or a call out to our listeners. Send us a tweet, send us an email, give us ideas of what's the next book, movie adaptation of Stephen King you'd like us to cover. We're open to suggestions, and we'll take a list. And I know Melissa has some ideas, and if your ideas on that one, then hey, we get some confirmation of going with that. So, but like I said, hit us up on Twitter and email, and we'll pick one to go off of.
Join us next time when we discuss chapter number 11, Walking Tours, Part 4. Richie Tozier makes tracks.
You'll float too.
Stay imaginary.
Thanks.